California's retail system is cracking in real time. Stores are locking up basic goods, employees are quitting out of fear, and once busy shopping streets are falling silent. What began as scattered theft incidents has evolved into a statewide economic emergency, pulling in law enforcement, insurers, and top political leaders. When major retailers abandon entire neighborhoods, the damage spreads far beyond storefronts, reshaping jobs, safety, and daily life. This is not a future warning or a distant risk. It is happening now, across nearly every major California city, and the consequences are accelerating faster than most people realize. Organized retail theft has surged across California at a scale that alarms both businesses and state officials. According to recent 2024 data from retail industry reports and state task forces, coordinated theft rings now account for billions in annual losses. These groups operate with precision, using lookouts, rapid grab-and-run tactics, and resale networks that move stolen goods online within hours. The problem is no longer limited to luxury items. Everyday essentials like toothpaste, baby formula, over-the-counter medicine, and food are frequent targets, creating visible chaos on store floors and forcing retailers to lock down basic products behind glass. These theft networks exploit legal thresholds that treat many repeat thefts as misdemeanors, reducing the immediate risk for offenders. Data from California law enforcement agencies shows that a small number of repeat actors are responsible for a disproportionate share of retail losses. Organized crews often hit multiple stores in a single day across different cities, overwhelming local police resources. Retailers report that arrest and release cycles allow the same individuals to return within days, sometimes hours, reinforcing a perception that theft carries limited consequences. The economic impact spreads far beyond stolen merchandise. Stores must invest heavily in security guards, surveillance systems, and redesigned layouts, increasing operating costs during a period of already thin margins. Many retailers respond by reducing hours, cutting staff, or closing locations entirely, especially in urban corridors. These closures reduce access to essential goods, eliminate local jobs, and shrink municipal tax revenue. As organized retail theft accelerates, it acts as a catalyst for wider retail instability, placing sustained pressure on California's economy and fueling growing concern at the highest levels of state government. The ripple effects also strain suppliers, logistics firms, and nearby small businesses, amplifying uncertainty across commercial districts already struggling with reduced foot traffic and declining investment. Mass store closures are spreading across California cities, transforming once busy shopping corridors into rows of darkened storefronts. In 2024 and early 2025, national chains and regional retailers announced hundreds of closures citing theft, declining foot traffic, and rising security costs. These shutdowns are not isolated to struggling neighborhoods. They increasingly affect downtown districts and suburban centers. When large retailers leave, smaller surrounding businesses lose anchor traffic, accelerating commercial decline and reducing access to everyday necessities for local residents. City planners warn closures erode community stability and discourage future investment across many urban regions statewide today alone now. Retail executives report that repeated theft incidents make long-term operations unpredictable, forcing companies to reassess location viability. Lease costs, insurance premiums, and private security expenses have surged, while profit margins shrink. Data from commercial real estate firms shows vacancy rates climbing in multiple metropolitan areas. As stores close, employees lose jobs, local suppliers lose contracts, and cities lose sales tax revenue needed for public services. These losses compound existing budget pressures and limit funding for transit, sanitation, policing, and neighborhood redevelopment projects, leaving communities with fewer resources and widening economic gaps between regions already under strain today, statewide overall. The pace of closures creates a feedback loop that deepens retail chaos statewide. Empty storefronts reduce foot traffic, inviting vandalism and further discouraging shoppers. Remaining retailers face higher risks as isolated locations become harder to secure. Analysts warn that without effective intervention, closures may accelerate through 2025, permanently reshaping California's commercial landscape and weakening economic resilience in both urban and suburban markets. This shift threatens long-term employment, consumer access, and investor confidence, signaling structural change rather than a temporary downturn for California's retail economy unless policies adapt quickly and enforcement capacity expands significantly across cities and counties statewide soon. Retail workers across California are facing a growing employee safety crisis that is reshaping the industry from the inside. Reports from 2024 show sharp increases in verbal threats, physical assaults, and intimidation during theft incidents. Employees are frequently instructed not to intervene, leaving them feeling powerless while chaos unfolds. Many workers describe constant anxiety during shifts, especially in understaffed stores. This environment erodes morale and accelerates burnout, turning retail jobs into high-stress positions rather than stable employment opportunities. Safety concerns now influence hiring decisions and push experienced staff to leave the sector entirely across multiple cities statewide. High-risk conditions make recruitment increasingly difficult. Retail associations report rising vacancy rates as applicants avoid frontline positions. Remaining staff often work longer hours with fewer coworkers, increasing exposure to dangerous encounters. Training budgets now focus on de-escalation rather than customer service. Workers describe feeling unsupported when incidents occur, especially when repeat offenders return. This dynamic undermines trust between employees and management, creating tension that affects performance, customer experience, and long-term workforce stability. Over time, this pressure drives turnover, raises costs, and weakens store operations in competitive retail environments across urban, suburban, and rural communities statewide today. The safety crisis carries economic consequences beyond individual stores. Higher turnover increases training expenses and reduces institutional knowledge. Fear-driven staffing shortages shorten operating hours and limit customer access. Communities lose jobs while consumers face reduced service and locked merchandise. As worker safety declines, retail becomes less resilient to shocks. Without meaningful changes, the workforce erosion will continue, intensifying retail instability and adding pressure to policymakers confronting a crisis that now affects employees, businesses, and local economies simultaneously. These trends signal long-lasting damage if safety remains unresolved at scale across California retail labor markets in coming years statewide ahead. Policy gaps and legal enforcement challenges sit at the center of California's retail chaos, creating conditions where theft thrives faster than accountability. Current laws classify many theft offenses below felony level, even when committed repeatedly. This structure limits arrest authority and weakens deterrence, particularly against organized groups that understand enforcement boundaries. Retailers report that offenders openly calculate theft amounts to stay under thresholds, treating fines or brief detentions as manageable costs. As a result, stores experience repeated losses from the same individuals, reinforcing the perception that rules favor persistence over prevention. Law enforcement agencies face operational strain under these constraints. Police departments must prioritize violent crime, leaving retail theft investigations under-resourced. Prosecutors encounter difficulty securing meaningful penalties without felony charges, especially when cases involve nonviolent theft. Data from 2024 shows low follow-through rates on retail crime cases, frustrating both businesses and officers. The gap between arrest and consequence undermines morale and discourages proactive policing. Retailers respond by reducing incident reporting, believing the process consumes time without producing results, further obscuring the true scale of the crisis. These enforcement limitations ripple through the broader economy. When laws fail to adapt to organized theft patterns, businesses absorb losses through price increases, security spending, or closures. Communities pay through reduced services and job losses. Policy debates intensify as state leaders balance criminal justice reform with economic stability. Without updated legal tools and coordinated enforcement strategies, retail theft remains a low-risk, high-reward activity. This imbalance fuels continued disruption and deepens uncertainty across California's commercial environment, keeping pressure on lawmakers as consequences accumulate across cities large and small statewide. Businesses warn delays amplify losses, normalize disorder, and accelerate retail withdrawal, making recovery harder as public confidence erodes and long-term investment decisions increasingly shift away from affected communities statewide. Retail flight from high-cost cities is accelerating as companies reassess risk versus reward. Major retailers now rank California urban locations among the most expensive and unpredictable markets in the country. Rising theft, security spending, insurance costs, and regulatory complexity combine with high rents and labor expenses. Corporate filings in 2024 show firms redirecting capital toward states with lower operating risk. This shift reflects strategic withdrawal rather than short-term adjustment, signaling that retailers increasingly view certain cities as structurally unviable for sustained physical operations. Executives cite long-range planning concerns and shareholder pressure driving relocation decisions nationwide. These departures create cascading economic effects within affected regions. When national chains exit, distribution partners, cleaning services, maintenance contractors, and local vendors lose steady revenue streams. Commercial real estate data shows vacancy rates climbing, pushing property owners to lower rents or abandon redevelopment plans. Municipal budgets suffer as sales tax and employment-related revenue declines. Over time, reduced investment weakens infrastructure, transit funding, and public services, making cities less attractive for remaining businesses and reinforcing the cycle of commercial retreat. Small businesses struggle to replace lost foot traffic and face higher borrowing costs during prolonged periods of uncertainty and contraction. This retail migration reshapes consumer behavior and long-term economic geography. Shoppers travel farther for essentials or shift permanently to online purchasing. Neighborhoods once anchored by stores experience declining safety perceptions and reduced daily activity. Analysts warn that reversing retail flight requires coordinated policy reform, enforcement credibility, and cost stabilization. Without intervention, California risks hollowing out commercial centers while growth shifts elsewhere. The trend signals a structural rebalancing that challenges employment, tax bases, and community cohesion across the state. Long-term consequences may persist for decades if corrective measures are delayed and recovery timelines continue extending beyond current economic cycles. Consumer confidence in California retail is eroding as shopping environments grow tense and inconvenient. Shoppers increasingly encounter locked displays, long wait times for assistance, and visible security presence that signals disorder rather than safety. Surveys from 2024 show many residents avoiding in-store shopping altogether, especially in urban cores. Fear of theft incidents, confrontations, or delays changes routine behavior. When purchasing essentials becomes stressful, consumers reduce visits, consolidate trips, or move spending online. This psychological shift matters because retail depends on habitual foot traffic. Once broken, these habits are difficult to rebuild. Retailers feel this collapse immediately through declining sales and unpredictable demand. Data from payment processors indicates sharper swings between peak and slow periods, complicating staffing and inventory planning. Shoppers who do enter stores buy fewer discretionary items and rush exits. Locked merchandise discourages impulse purchases, historically a major profit driver. As confidence drops, promotions lose effectiveness and loyalty programs weaken. This environment forces retailers to raise prices or cut services, which further alienates customers. The result is a self-reinforcing loop where fear and inconvenience steadily suppress consumer participation. At the macro level, weakened confidence undermines urban recovery and local employment. Retail thrives on trust, predictability, and ease, all currently strained. Economists warn that prolonged avoidance behavior can permanently reset shopping patterns. Once consumers adapt to alternatives, physical stores struggle to win them back. Restoring confidence requires visible order, consistent enforcement, and reliable access to goods. Without these elements, retail chaos becomes normalized. As confidence erodes, economic momentum slows, affecting suppliers, workers, and city finances alike, deepening the broader crisis confronting California's retail ecosystem. Long-term consequences include reduced investment, weaker neighborhoods, shrinking tax bases, and slower innovation, making recovery harder even when conditions improve and policy responses eventually strengthen across regions over multiple economic cycles statewide ahead. Local supply chains across California are increasingly disrupted as retail theft and instability distort normal inventory flows. In 2024 and 2025, retailers reported frequent shortages not caused by manufacturing delays, but by repeated in-store losses that make demand forecasting unreliable. When stolen items vanish faster than sales data predicts, automated restocking systems fail. Shelves remain empty longer, frustrating customers and reducing store credibility. Suppliers receive erratic orders, forcing them to hold excess stock or cut production, both of which raise costs and weaken efficiency throughout regional distribution networks statewide. These disruptions hit smaller retailers hardest. Large chains may absorb losses through centralized warehouses, but independent stores rely on predictable deliveries and limited cash reserves. Repeated theft forces them to overorder, increasing exposure to shrinkage or underorder, risking empty shelves. Transportation partners face inefficiencies as delivery schedules shift unpredictably. Warehouses struggle to plan labor needs. This instability ripples outward, affecting packaging firms, drivers, and local manufacturers. As costs rise, suppliers pass expenses back to retailers, who then raise prices for consumers already strained by inflation pressures. Over time, fractured supply chains reduce resilience during broader economic shocks. Natural disasters, port delays, or fuel price spikes compound existing instability. Analysts warn that retail chaos undermines California's role as a logistics hub, particularly for food, health products, and household essentials. When distribution confidence weakens, companies reconsider regional investment. This threatens long-term employment in warehousing and transportation sectors. Stabilizing retail environments is therefore not only about storefronts, but about protecting interconnected supply systems. Without intervention, disruptions multiply, increasing prices, reducing availability, and amplifying uncertainty across California's commercial infrastructure. These pressures gradually erode competitiveness, pushing suppliers to prioritize other regions with more predictable retail conditions, accelerating economic fragmentation across markets statewide. Insurance withdrawal from retail markets is quietly intensifying California's retail crisis. In high-risk urban areas, insurers are reducing coverage or exiting entirely due to repeated theft claims and vandalism losses. Data from 2024 shows premiums rising sharply for stores that remain insured, often doubling within a single renewal cycle. Some retailers are required to accept higher deductibles or reduced protection, increasing exposure to catastrophic loss. Without affordable coverage, operating a physical store becomes financially untenable, especially for small and mid-sized businesses with limited reserves. This insurance pullback creates immediate operational consequences. Landlords may require coverage as a lease condition, forcing tenants to close when policies lapse. Lenders hesitate to finance uninsured properties, freezing renovations and expansions. Retailers divert capital from growth into risk management, slowing innovation and job creation. Even well-performing stores face closure when insurance costs exceed profit margins. The result is an invisible pressure that accelerates retail retreat without public announcements, leaving communities puzzled by sudden shutdowns and empty spaces. At the systemic level, insurance withdrawal magnifies instability across entire commercial districts. When one store closes, risk perceptions increase for neighboring businesses, raising premiums further. This clustering effect can render whole corridors uninsurable. Economists warn that once insurers abandon an area, recovery becomes far more difficult. Rebuilding trust requires sustained reductions in claims and credible enforcement. Until then, retail chaos feeds insurance flight, and insurance flight feeds retail collapse. This cycle threatens long-term commercial viability across California, increasing vacancies, reducing employment, and weakening municipal revenue bases already under stress from declining economic activity and rising public service costs statewide. Retail chaos increasingly overlaps with California's homelessness crisis, creating daily friction at storefronts across the state. Many retailers operate on the front lines of social breakdown, facing situations that blend theft, mental health emergencies, and public safety concerns. Store employees are often untrained to manage these encounters, yet must respond in real time. Public spaces around shops become sites of conflict, discouraging customers and increasing cleanup and security costs. This convergence places retail workers in roles resembling crisis responders, adding stress and operational disruption while exposing gaps in social service capacity statewide. Data from city agencies in 2024 shows retail districts experiencing higher incident reports related to trespassing, property damage, and emergency calls. Businesses report frequent disruptions outside entrances, including loitering, encampments, and confrontations that deter foot traffic. Police and outreach teams are stretched thin, leaving stores without consistent support. Retailers face a dilemma between compassion and safety, often absorbing responsibility for problems beyond their control. These tensions reduce operating hours, accelerate staff turnover, and increase the likelihood of closure, especially in dense urban corridors where homelessness is most visible. The economic consequences extend beyond individual stores. When retail spaces destabilize, surrounding neighborhoods lose daily activity that supports safety and commerce. Shoppers avoid affected areas, weakening local economies and isolating vulnerable populations further. Analysts warn that without coordinated solutions linking housing, mental health services, and enforcement, retail environments will remain pressure points. Businesses cannot substitute for systemic support. As this overlap intensifies, it reinforces retail chaos and deepens urban strain. Addressing one crisis without the other limits recovery, prolonging instability across California's commercial and social landscape over the long term statewide. Sustained neglect risks normalizing disorder, reducing investment appetite, weakening civic trust, and locking communities into cycles of decline that prove costly to reverse later for everyone involved. Political pressure is intensifying as retail chaos evolves into a statewide economic risk that demands urgent attention from state leadership. Retail instability now threatens employment, tax revenue, and long-term growth across California. Lawmakers face mounting criticism from businesses, workers, and local governments as store closures accelerate and crime-driven losses continue. Economic warning signs appear in budget forecasts as declining sales taxes weaken funding for public services, including transit, education, and infrastructure planning. This pressure amplifies scrutiny of policy choices and enforcement capacity at the state level today. Political credibility and leadership confidence are increasingly questioned publicly. State officials warn that unchecked retail collapse could trigger a broader economic slowdown, particularly in urban regions reliant on consumer spending. Analysts note that retail supports millions of jobs directly and indirectly through logistics, real estate, and services. When stores vanish, these networks weaken simultaneously, creating gaps that are difficult to rebuild. Policy debates now focus on balancing public safety reforms with economic stability as election cycles approach. Pressure rises from voters experiencing empty storefronts, reduced access, and job losses in their communities. This environment heightens urgency for visible action and measurable results from Sacramento leadership teams statewide today now. Without decisive intervention, retail chaos risks becoming a permanent feature of California's economic landscape. Business confidence depends on predictability and consistent rule enforcement, both of which are under strain. Prolonged instability encourages capital flight, discourages entrepreneurship, and weakens innovation ecosystems. State leaders face narrowing timelines to restore order, credibility, and competitiveness. Failure to act could lock in structural decline that outlasts current political cycles. The stakes extend beyond retail, affecting housing development, employment mobility, and long-term fiscal health. As pressure mounts, solutions must address enforcement, policy coordination, and economic recovery together to prevent lasting damage across cities and regions. California's retail system is cracking in real time. Stores are locking up basic goods, employees are quitting out of fear, and once busy shopping streets are falling silent. What began as scattered theft incidents has evolved into a statewide economic emergency, pulling in law enforcement, insurers, and top political leaders. When major retailers abandon entire neighborhoods, the damage spreads far beyond storefronts, reshaping jobs, safety, and daily life. This is not a future warning or a distant risk. It is happening now across nearly every major California city, and the consequences are accelerating faster than most people realize.